Hello everyone, this is Dr. Elimatrix. Welcome to today's lesson, which is going to be our introductory lesson for students doing grade 11 or grade 12 pure mathematics. So we are going to focus first on the algebraic section, and today the topic that we want to focus on is the solution of quadratic equations. But what is going to be covered in this video, or the objectives of this lesson, are as shown on the screen. So this is the only material that is going to be covered in this video. But before we delve deep into this lesson, please subscribe to this channel so that you may be notified when new videos come in. And if you find this video very useful, it will be great if I were to get any comments from you guys. Thank you. Otherwise, let's begin. So what are quadratic equations? Quadratic equations are any univariable equations that can be written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0, where a, b, c are real numbers. So any equation that can be written in this form, we call it a quadratic equation or a polynomial equation of degree 2. So x here is the unknown variable. And it's a dummy variable, meaning you can use any suitable letter. We can call this y, we can call this p, we can call it anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be x, like that. So these equations, or quadratic equations, they can be solved using various techniques, and the methods that can be used are as follows. So we have different methods for solving these type of equations, and those involve the factorization method, and then the completing the square, which is also the formula in some way. And then lastly, we have the graphical method. So these are the techniques that we know so far that can be employed to solve quadratic equations. We have also other techniques like Vieta's methods, but we are not going to bother about that at the moment. So today, our main focus is to learn to solve quadratic equations using the factorization method. So that is going to be the focus of today's video. So let's get on that. So now, what we're going to do, we are going to look at few examples, and we are going to demonstrate using these examples how one can go about solving quadratic equations by making use of factorization. But one thing that you should always know is that factorization does not always work. So you must be warned that the factorization technique is a technique that has limitations associated with it. It can work on solving certain types of quadratic equations, those that can be factorized. So those that cannot be factorized, this technique fails, and therefore will need other techniques to cater for all that. But to learn how to use this technique, we are going to look at a few examples. So our first example goes as follows. So we are asked to solve the equation x squared minus 3x minus 18 equal to 0. You see, so this example that I've provided here, I usually classify it as a category 1 problem. So different types of problems which have anything to do with quadratic equations, they can be classified into different categories. So we have the category 1. Category 1 problems are those problems whereby the coefficient of the squared term is always positive 1 or negative 1. So every time if you come across a problem where the coefficient of the squared term is positive 1 or negative 1, we call that a category 1 problem. So category 1 problems, they are the easiest to solve by factorization. And how do you go about that? So to solve such equations, we proceed as follows. So what you do, you take your quadratic equation and make sure it's written in its general form. By general form, it means it has to appear in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. When you have done that and you have category 1 problem, the next thing that you do, you just open two empty brackets and equate them to 0. Then the next thing that you do, in each bracket, you fill in x like that. Then the next thing that you do, you go and look at your constant term, which is negative 18 in this case. So what you do is you look for two factors of negative 18, which are such that when you add them together, they give you the coefficient of the middle term. So if you can find two factors or two numbers whose product is negative 18, and when added they give us negative 3, then you have successfully factorized. Because once you identify such numbers, then it's easy to just proceed. So what we're going to do, we're going to see if we can see such numbers. So if you look closely, you can see that if I were to take 6 and 3, we see that 6 and 3, they always give us 18. But now we want to arrange them such that they give us negative 18 and negative 3 when added. So the best way to do that is to take 6 to be positive or to be negative and 3 to be positive. So we see that now when I say plus 3 minus 16, I get negative 3, and the product gives us that. So once we have identified those two numbers, the next thing that we do is we place them inside these brackets. The order does not matter. So I will place positive 3 here and negative 6 there. Then the next thing that follows this is that whenever we have two brackets and whose product is equal to 0, then it is always the case that either the first bracket is equal to 0 or the second bracket is equal to 0. So therefore, if we were to solve these two, we see that x is either equal to negative 6 or negative 3, or x is equal to 6. And that's it. Like that. So that's our first example. Then moving on to example 2. So example 2 problems is as follows. They say solve 4x squared equal to 9. So this is a category 2 problem. So what are category 2 problems? Category 2 problems are those problems which are such that the given equation is binomial and every term is a perfect square. So all problems which satisfy this property or these two properties of one being binomial and all terms being perfect square, we call them category 2 problems. So category 2 problems, they're also very simple to solve. Their factorization is very simple. So the first thing that we do is we make sure that we have 0 the other side. So we write it in general form. So this equation can be written as 4x squared minus 9 equal to 0. So every time if you have two terms and both those terms are perfect squares, then that's a category 2 problem. So to solve it, you just open up two brackets and equate that to 0. So what we do now is first we look at the first term of the expression and then we determine its square root. So what is the square root of 4x squared? Is 2x. So that 2x, we place it in each of these brackets. Then in one bracket you place a negative sign and the other one you place a positive sign. It doesn't matter which sign you start with. Then the next thing, we determine the square root of the other term, which is 9 in this case, and its square root is 3. So the 3 fills in the missing spaces there. So again, we have two brackets whose product is 0. So it implies that 2x minus 3 equal to 0, or 2x plus 3 equal to 0. So therefore, it follows that x is equals to negative 3 over 2, or x is equal to 3 over 2. And that's our final solution, like that. Then, moving on to the last category of problems. So, example 3 now. So, example 3, we are asked to solve 3x squared plus 10 equal to 17x, like that. So what is a category 2 problem? So a category 3 problem is one whereby the coefficient is no longer plus 1 or negative 1, and also the quadratic expression is no longer binomial, it is a trinomial expression, and we have a coefficient which is not plus or minus 1 there. So those are the properties that characterize a problem to fall under category 3 problems. So how do we solve category 3 problems? So to solve category 3 problems, we proceed as follows. So what we do first is we arrange this in its general format. So this equation, when written in general format, it becomes 3x squared minus 17x plus 10 equal to 0. Then the next thing that we do, we take the first term and the last term and we multiply them together. So when we multiply these two together, we get 30x squared, like that. So as soon as we get the result of this product, which is this term, our main focus now shifts to that term. So what we do now is, when we are here, we look for two numbers or two factors of this number, which are such that when we add them together, they produce the middle term of our equation. So we should look for two numbers which are such that when you multiply these two together, you get 30x squared, but when you add them, you get negative 17x. So it is very easy to spot two such numbers, because I see that 15 by 2 gives me 30, and I know that 15 and 2 give me 17 again. So I have to see how I can arrange these two together so that at least they give me a negative 17x. So we see that these two numbers should be all given the negative sign. So we should take them as negative 2x and negative 15x. So once we've found those two numbers, what we do now is we remove the center term and replace it with those two. So we now have 3x squared, then we have negative 2x negative 15x plus 10 equal 0. So what we have done here now, we have created an expression which we know that when we are to factorize it, we have to use factorization by grouping. So I'm going to create two groups here, which is group 1 and group 2. So each group is going to be treated as a binomial equation. So I'm going to then factorize this. So the common factor here, we can see that it's just x. So I'll pull x out, and what is going to remain is 3x minus 2. Then immediately when I'm done with the first expression, I bring down the sign of the next coming term. Then I look for factors of these two numbers now. So what are the factors of these two terms between 15 and 10? We see it's 5, so we put that. So it's like we've factored negative 5 out. What remains there? We still remain with 3x minus 2 equal to 0. So this is one of the things that should always happen when you are solving these type of equation. When you factorize your groups, you must always get two expressions which are similar in the parentheses. So when this happens, the next thing that you do is you take one of these terms in the brackets, and then you open another empty bracket. In the empty brackets, you put all the terms that appear on the outside. Then we have that. So we know the story, how it proceeds from here. So it therefore follows that if I were to solve this, I get that x is equals to 2/3, or x is equals to 5. And that's the end.